Hello everyone, this is a tutorial on using Scrapy. So the first part of the tutorial is highly similar to the official Scrapy documentation, okay? And this is an excellent tutorial. I made this video in part because when my friends got done with the Scrapy tutorial, they had difficulty using the Scrapy tutorial for their own projects. So I figured I'd make a slightly harder tutorial than the Scrapy tutorial, in the hopes that you can accomplish scraping tougher websites. Okay? So first things first. In this video, we'll first, make sure we have Scrapy installed. The second thing we'll do is make a Scrapy project. Next, we'll find something to scrape. Make sure we have multiple start URLs. We'll go over using Scrapy shell. Basically just, a good place to test your XPaths is in Scrapy shell, and I'll get into that in a bit. And I'll go over how we store the data we extract. Basically, when we have a website, you have some sort of unstructured data, and we want to put into some structured form when we scrape. So I'll get into that in a bit. That's the items.py file, if you're familiar with Scrapy already. We'll next get into the code for our actual spider itself. And finally, we'll run our scraper and show the outputted data. And for this tutorial, we'll be using a website called Fundraiser as a source of the data we're going to scrape. Okay? Takes a second. Okay? And let me just put this in another tab. Okay. Okay. Oh, sorry. There we go. Okay. So first things first, if you don't have Scrapy installed, it's really simple to install Scrapy if you have Anaconda. If you currently don't have Anaconda, down below this video, I'll have the link to this tutorial document. It's a README. I'll probably have a link to a blog post going over this in even greater detail. And so if you have Anaconda, great. You can simply check if you have Scrapy installed by doing conda list and seeing if you have Scrapy. I have it installed, which is great. However, if you don't have Anaconda, first install it. And if you don't have Scrapy, it's a simple conda install Scrapy. Okay? It takes a second. Okay? So it says I already have it installed. I should note that this tutorial has been tested in Python 2 and Python 3, and it works in both. So hopefully you guys don't run into issues if you use Python 2 or 3. Okay? So next thing I want to emphasize is for this tutorial, it really helps to have Google Chrome or Firefox. And the reason being is with Google Chrome or Firefox, it's easy to inspect the pages that you want to scrape. And very briefly, inspect is if you right-click on something, click inspect, and you can see the source code. Okay? And we'll get into that in quite a bit of detail. Okay? So if you have all that settled, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a Scrapy project. Okay? So I'm going to go to my desktop. Okay? And I should mention that if you're on a Windows, you can do this in the command line. On my Mac and on Linux as well, you can do this in terminal, and this is a terminal. Okay? So now that I'm on my desktop, I'm gonna create a project. It'll be called Fundraiser because the website I'll be taking data from is called Fundraiser. Okay? It's a crowdfunding website, relatively similar to GoFundMe. Okay? So this command, what it does is it makes a fundraiser directory with the following contents. it gives me the fundraiser, like, main directory, which is what I'm going to CD into right now. Okay. It gives me some config file. Let's not worry about that for this tutorial. It also gives me another folder called fundraiser. Items.py is kind of how we'll store the data once we extract it from a website before we output it. Ignore pipelines for this tutorial as well. Settings.py is really important if you do a lot of scraping, and I'll get into that in further tutorials. And we also have a folder called spiders, and in this tutorial we'll make a spider inside this folder called spiders. Okay, so that's what we currently have, this image right over here. Okay, so before we actually get into the code of scraping itself, you need good start URLs to scrape something. You have to have a website to be able to scrape. Okay, so I have images over here going through basics of inspecting and looking at different start URLs. However, I'm going to go over it in this tutorial, and hopefully with me going over it in a video format as well as going over it with images, people can figure out how to scrape things they want to scrape. Okay, so in the spider framework, start URLs is a list of URLs where the spider will begin to crawl from. Okay, so start URLs, this is one start URL over here. Okay, and if I look at this page in full screen, you see that in the page over here, first I have this URL here, and this URL changes if I choose different categories. Right now I'm on health and illness, and if I change to accidents and disasters, this category over here is going to change. Okay, so for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm interested in health and illness campaigns, which I recommend you donate to if you have the means. Anyway, so on this page, what you notice is there's 12 campaigns, okay? And if you click on a title, it goes to an individual campaign, okay? So the reason why I'm mentioning this is on this page there's 12 campaigns. If I'm going to rate a scraper, having one start URL is not the greatest unless you can find ways to scrape a ton of information from one page. In this case, I can only get 12 campaigns, and I'll get into that in a little bit. Okay, so what I want to emphasize, especially with this tutorial, is pages change, and if you're watching this 5 years from now, chances are the website changed. So this is kind of like a time limit tutorial until Fundraiser changes its website structure. But as long as you understand the principles of scraping, you can usually scrape a website. Okay, so what I was on about before is there's 12 campaigns per page. As you see in this image, I'm right-clicking on the next button at the bottom of the page. Okay, and I'll click inspect, and the purpose of this part is really just to get more start URLs. Okay, so if I click on next on this page, you notice that on the link it takes me to has end page equals 2 appended to the URL. Okay, and on this page there's 12 more campaigns. And what you start to notice as you click on more and more of these buttons, page increments, okay? And on each one of these pages is 12 more campaigns. So if you find a way to, not just have, the original start URL, which was this, but start getting, this is the first start URL, a second start URL, a third start URL, fourth, and so on and so forth, you can get a lot of information scraped. You just have to find out the pattern that the website has its URLs in, okay? Some websites are a lot more complicated, but for this site, it's pretty simple. Okay. So going back to this README document, which again will be down below in the comments section if you're following this from the YouTube page. And if you're following this from the blog, well, I don't know why you're listening to the video from the blog, but anyway, whatever works. Okay. So the code you'll see in the spider later on in this tutorial, what this code does is from that first start URL, we have, the first start URL. And for end pages equals 2, what we're basically doing is we're getting this page as well as this next page over here. Okay. Basically, we're creating more start URLs with this for loop. And we're taking advantage of the fact that we understand that when you click the next button, you get another start URL. Okay? So while this is fantastic, we have a bunch of start URLs. What we haven't done yet is we haven't figured out the pattern with the individual campaign links. Okay? And I'll get to this right now. So if I just did inspect, or if I click one of these campaigns, it gives me a different URL, okay? So the next thing we want to understand is how to get these URLs for each individual campaign, because there's 12 campaigns per start URL in this tutorial. Okay? So we right-click on the title, we click inspect, and what we really want to get is we want to get this partial URL, okay? And the reason why I say it's partial is if I enter this into a browser, this is going to give me nothing. What this is missing is something called the scheme, which is basically just the HTTPS thing. Okay? So the goal really is to find a way to just extract this from each start URL. And there's 12 of these per page. Okay? At least for the first, 100 pages on this website. Eventually, there's going to be less campaigns per page because there's only so many campaigns on the website. Okay? So to get this information, we have to utilize something called XPaths. And the best way to learn about XPaths and to test them is to use something called Scrapy Shell. And these XPaths combined with Scrapy Shell will teach us how to extract elements from these different web pages or these quote-unquote different HTML documents. Okay? Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to open up Scrapy Shell to see if we can find a way to, get these campaign links. Okay? So, I'm going to close this temporarily. I'm going to open up Scrapy Shell. So I'm on my desktop right now. I'd recommend you CD into fundraiser. So right now I was initially on my desktop and I'm in the fundraiser directory. Okay. And this is pertinent for later on in the tutorial. Okay. So if you're on Mac or Linux, you just do Scrapy Shell single quote and then the link and close the single quote. And on Windows you really do need double quotes. Okay, I try to make this tutorial as so everybody on any operating system can utilize this tutorial. Okay, so now we're in something called Scrapy Shell, and what you see over here on this document, at least partially, this is utilizing XPaths. And if you don't know what this response thing is, that's okay. The response is just the URL we inputted here, okay? It's just this page which you should be relatively familiar with. And I should note, if you're watching this in the future, there will be different campaigns here because websites update, okay? So I'm going to get into extracting the title. And we'll do quite a bit of XPaths on this tutorial. just so you get a little bit of practice. Okay, and the goal of our XPath is to extract these partial campaign URLs. Okay, and there should be 12 on this page because there were 12 on the website we were viewing. Okay, so basically, let's go over how we got this. So let me open up this page over here and Scrapy Shell in the right half of the screen and the web page itself on the left half. Okay, so what you notice over here first with the XPath is we have these double slashes here, double forward slashes, and what this is doing is we're forgetting about where the document starts, the HTML, and we're immediately going to an H2 tag that has the class title headline font, okay, or that contains a class title headline font. Okay, so if we were just to enter this, okay, we get to something like this, and it's a bit too much information. You can see that we kind of have the name of the campaigns here. We have the name, and we have our URL here, but we don't have just the URL here, and that's really what we're looking for. Okay, so we have to do a more exact XPath. So below this H2 tag with the class title headline font, this /a means that below this H2 class over here, I'm looking for an A tag that has the class campaign link, which is right here. And what I want to extract is a link, okay? And don't worry about not understanding the specifics of XPath. I'll basically do a few so you can kind of understand the pattern. And in the README itself, I'll leave a link to a good resource for XPath because it takes time to understand it, okay? Let's see if I can get back to my GitHub. Okay. Oh, right here. Okay. So while this is fantastic, I also want to mention that you'll see this code in our scraper, in our spider later, or this, you'll see a lot of other code, but you'll see this part of the code, and this code is essentially, it's the same XPath, and all it's doing is it's iterating through each one of these partial URLs and appending the scheme to it, the HTTPS thing, because otherwise it's not a complete URL for the purpose of this tutorial. We're adding the scheme to it, okay? So next thing, while we figured out how to get, where is it? We figured out the links to the 12 campaigns in our first start URL, and this pattern will hold up for our other start URLs. We haven't begun to figure out anything about the individual campaigns themselves, because the whole point of this is to get information from each one of these campaigns in a structured format to be able to analyze, or to see if there's a better way to help people, or whatever your goal is, really. Anyway, so what we'll start doing now is we'll inspect individual campaigns. But first, you notice over here I'm still in Scrapy Shell. I would highly recommend typing exit to exit the Scrapy Shell. And it's just good practice, really, because we'll have to launch Scrapy Shell again with a different URL. So you'll see over here, we're going to launch Scrapy Shell with a response that's a individual campaign, whereas before we launched it with a start URL, okay? So in this tutorial, I'm using a random campaign. just to inspect, analyze, and to show you how to get certain information from it. Okay, so first things first, though, to test the XPath that we want to, work with, it really helps, to use Scrapy Shell. And again, if you're on Windows, you need double quotes. Because I'm on Mac, I use single quotes. Okay. So I'm launching Scrapy Shell again, this time with an individual campaign. So, and I should open an individual campaign so I can show you. Okay. So for this campaign over here, if I want to extract the title, because I want to extract a couple things from this page. The title of the campaign, how much they've raised, how many contributors, and maybe a few other things. Maybe the story, whatever you think is good. And feel free to scrape other things on this page if you want to. I ask that, you don't hit the service too hard. Make end pages, low number if you can, so you're not scraping the entire website in whole. Okay. So on this individual page, if I want to find a way to use XPath to extract a title from a campaign, okay, you notice that it's under the div ID title panel, and underneath that it has a div ID campaign title. Okay. So it's really just the same process as what we did before. Sorry. So on this page over here, it's kind of hard when I only have one screen. You notice a few things. So in this XPath over here, you notice that we're immediately going to start. Where is this div ID? Contains campaign title. Where did it go? I'll just open it again. Okay. We immediately want to go to div ID with the ID campaign title, which is this over here. And then from there, all we want to do is get the text from it. There's a couple different ways to do this with XPath. This way works, and let's see if a different way works. Because Descendant, you could use it for other stuff, but really all I think we need in this case is text. Okay, yield the same result. And if you have any questions and differences between these two XPaths, please let me know. XPaths take time to understand and get good at. Okay. And you can do this similar things for the amount raised, the goal, the campaign, the currency type. So some people ask for dollar, some people ask for yen, some people ask for Canadian dollar, and so on and so forth. And then I also extracted the URL in case I want to evaluate them to see if the scraper got the content that I wanted. Because sometimes on pages, like this page might be slightly different than another person's campaign page, and contributors might be, instead of being over here, it might be at the bottom. It's possible. And so I basically include the URL just kind of for error checking and to spot check my data to make sure I'm actually scraping what I want to scrape. So after this, I'd recommend exiting Scrapy Shell again using exit. Okay. So before we get into the actual code for the spider itself, I want to briefly go over, when we scrape our data, the entire point of scraping is to extract, structured data from unstructured sources. Websites are pretty unstructured. And Scrapy spiders can return the data as essentially Python dictionaries. And for this tutorial, just assume that this class over here is essentially a Python dictionary. And for each thing we extract, we need a Scrapy field, okay? And this is something we're going to save under items.py. Currently, I have an items.py when I use start project. One sec, where is it? Here. Okay. So I have this. And you can either open items.py on here and then copy and paste it to your current items.py and save it, because for a spider, it's gonna extract, certain things using our XPath, and it has to put the data in some, structure, and that's the whole purpose of this items.py thing. Okay, I would recommend, honestly, just go into the code here, clicking the link, Control save if you're on Windows, I think, and then Command S if you're on Mac, and just overwriting the original items.py. One sec. Oh, did I overwrite it? I don't think I did. Okay. One sec. I didn't overwrite the original items.py. So in this case, I'm just gonna copy the code, save it. Okay. And we save it under the fundraiser/fundraiser directory. If you can save it over the original items.py, I'd highly recommend you do so. Anyway, so now let's get into the fun part, which is the code for the spider itself. And what we'll be doing here is, initially we don't have this fundraiser underscore scrape.py. We'll create that. And this is just the code for our spider, okay? And you can download the code here, okay? And a lot of the code is stuff we've discussed earlier in this tutorial. Again, we have the name of our scraper. This is important, as to crawl, sometimes you have a lot of different spiders inside the spiders directory. I went over the start URLs. This is the code to create all the different start URLs. What this over here does again is it gets 12 campaigns per start URL. Okay, and then what this does is it extracts individual information from individual campaigns. Okay, and it's pretty simple code in itself. So to get this spider to work for this tutorial, download the code here, click on this, Control S or Command S, and we save it under spiders. Okay, let me make sure it's in the right place. Okay, so it should be here, and this should not be here. Items.py should be only over here. Okay, and fundraiser scrape should be in the spider folder. Okay, so now that we've done that, we can actually run our spider. Okay, so a few things. So to run the spider, you have to be in the fundraiser/fundraiser directory, and the reason being is this is the name of our spider, and while I'm not super familiar with the specifics of how Scrapy works, the internal workings, this is the name of our spider, and it gets to see if it's a valid name by looking inside the spider directory. And what this does over here, this is basically saying we want to output whatever we scrape to a file called monthday_year.csv. You can output it to JSON or whatever you like, really. Okay, so let's run our spider. Okay, so I put this command into my terminal. Okay, so I should get roughly 36 campaigns. Okay, and I'll show you how I got that number in a second. Okay, and it really comes down to there being 12 campaigns per start URL, and let me just it's better to look at it this way. So there's 12 campaigns per start URL, and for the code I gave you, I basically wanted 2 additional start URLs, and the 2 additional start URLs are created here. Okay, so if we have 3 start URLs total and there's 12 per page, we should get roughly 36 things scraped. 36 campaigns. Okay? So, I want to show you, now that we've actually run our, spider and we scrape stuff, I want to show you what it outputted. So the data should be outputted in the fundraiser/fundraiser directory. And on my computer, I have the CSV file open, interpreted through Excel. So I have 36 campaigns. I have the story, the amount raised, the goal, the URL in case I want to go back to campaign and see that this is actually accurate. Okay, the currency type, and how many people have contributed to the campaign so far. Okay, depending on how Excel interprets the CSV file, you could have between these rows, separate out with an additional line. As long as you have a decent number of campaigns scraped, you should be good. And that's it for this tutorial. Please let me know if you have any questions. I am more than happy to help. I should mention as well that I changed end pages from 2 to 450 to get a roughly 6,000 campaigns scraped. And if you want to, play with the data, you can click on this link. It takes a bit to load because it's a bigger file. Do Control Save, and you can play with the data. Okay? And that's it. Please subscribe if you can. If not, that's okay too. Thanks.